Over 100 people have died in ongoing violence between the Sudanese military and protesters. The AU says Sudan will remain suspended until an effective civilian-led transitional authority is established. Opposition groups are pressing for the army to hand over power to a civilian government. The military ousted long-time dictator Omar al-Bashir in April, and the country has been experiencing unrest since December. For more on this now, we have with us ENCA reporter Kailihle Kumalo, who joins me in the studio. Kailihle, thank you so much for popping in just to bring us the very latest on this. A bit of a surprise move, some would say, from those who've been covering the movements of the AU as you have. What does this now mean for the governing of Sudan?
So effectively it means that now Sudan has been suspended. So now they won't be enjoying the privileges of being associated with the African Union. So when you go back to April, the issue around the civilian government has always been a key demand of the pro-democracy group since the ousting of al-Bashir. That has been a rallying cry in the streets of Khartoum. But now, Marcel, the issue of the timing of the AU Peace and Security Council, that's actually now a questionable move, because when they met in Egypt in April, they said they're giving Khartoum about 15 days to sort out the issue or face now this sort of sanction. So why has it taken so long? Why are they acting after the massacre?
Now, one of the criticisms of the AU that we've heard repeatedly is that it's a toothless organization. What would the impact of this move by the AU have on Sudan?
Well, clearly it's sending a very clear message to the member states that if you're not following the prescript of what is required of you, then you'll be suspended. But also the AU is guided by the Constitutive Act. You have Article 4 stating and stipulating categorically that if there is an unchange of government and constitutionally, and also, I mean, the civilians have been subjected to the worst form of atrocities, the army really just, the crackdown in the streets of Khartoum.
Heavy-handed.
Absolutely, very heavy-handed tactics. So really all those things really pointing to a very, very volatile situation.
You've been following this story very, very closely. Have we seen any reaction coming out of Sudan from ordinary Sudanese people to this move by the AU?
We're still waiting for the pro-democracy groupings, whether they're throwing their weight behind this particular step. But overwhelmingly, this would be such a very important step, because now the key question, Marcel, is what's going to happen to Sudan? Will the Arab League come on board? We've seen the military leaders going to countries like UAE. So these are some of the key backers of the military. Or will the political situation continue in Sudan where there's no solution in sight? Because if the AU, Peace and Security Council, effectively saying, we are suspending you, they are simply saying we can't do anything, we don't know what to do. A very concerning situation, because Sudan is a very key country where it's located. It has the maritime access in terms of trade. So many countries rely on the ports of Sudan.
It's been a very, very tragic turn in the story. There were such uplifting pictures coming out of Sudan when news came through that Omar al-Bashir was finally being moved from his position. One can only hope that a more peaceful end of some kind can be brought to this country sometime soon.
Well, absolutely, Marcel. I mean, I remember the jubilation in the street.
There
was priceless. So there was that young lady who was really chanting, calling for freedom. So there was that great deal. So now it's like a revolution gone wrong. But more often than not, it's always the case where we all just get into the jumping wagon where we say we want, the change of government. But at times, post-revolution, there's always that lack of a clear blueprint. It's a similar situation we've seen in Algeria. So in Khartoum as well, it's a very similar situation playing out.
So from what we understand, still a very, very volatile situation on the ground?
Extremely volatile situation, but also there has been a degree of repression in terms of the reports. So many media houses are not given as much unfettered access as possible. So there has been just this repression, a very disappointing situation.
Have we had any reaction, let's say, from South Africa, who's known as a leading member of the AU, or any other African states that have reacted to this latest news coming from the AU?
Absolutely. So from the South African side, there has been a statement issued out by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Simply put, they're saying they're concerned by the scenes that we have seen in Sudan. So really sitting on the fence, not really just pointing out exactly what do they mean by that. But I mean, we're still expecting more reaction to come out. But this is a very concerning situation because Sudan in Africa, and also now we still do know that Omar al-Bashir is still facing those charges. As much as in terms of the charges, really, it hasn't been clear in terms of whether will the Darfur region, those charges dating back to now the conviction by the International Criminal Court, whether those charges will be added and be combined with the charges of, the onslaughts that we saw in the streets when he was trying to keep down the protesters.
We're going to leave it there for now. Khayelitsha Khumalo, thank you so much for that update. We're going to stay with that story for now and get you some more reaction. Sipho Mantula from the Institute for Dispute Resolution in Africa joins me now on the line. Thank you so much for joining us. News coming through just over the last half hour or so that Sudan has been suspended from any activities involving the African Union. From what you understand, what does this now mean for the governing of that country?
Afternoon, my sister, even to the viewers. I think what is critical, you'll remember that 3 days ago, the chairperson of the African Union, Moussa Faki, strongly condemned the violence that erupted and with the numbers. So what is it will be the way forward? One will say that the Transitional Military Council will be not having more powers or will not even have any economic trade with any neighbors. Secondly, they will be suspended from the forthcoming AU assembly session that is coming in Addis Ababa in July. So you will see that there are already pressure points that is coming to the Transitional Military Council, as well as if one looks at the issue of that the AU is pushing forward for dialogue, mediation. And that's where, again, we need to learn from the cases that have happened with the South Sudan conflict, with the cases in Egypt, Algeria, when there is a popular protest, the AU comes late to the party, because we can say the AU has brought some life to the people of the North Sudan, when actually this has erupted for many years in terms of the military rule of General al-Bashir. And currently, the remnants and the remaining generals who have been involved, as alleged in the Darfur genocide, are the same people continue to harm and to even kill the ordinary civilians.
Your opinion that the AU's move just comes a little too late has been mirrored by quite a bit of the immediate reaction we've had from this move. Yep. Do you think this is a move by the AU to try and insert themselves into a story that they should have been involved in far earlier? Or do you think that they finally are now sending a clear message that unconstitutional governments will not be accommodated by their organization?
No, definitely. One can say that the AU now, it is pressured by the international community, whether it's the US, it's Russia. But what is critical now is that the African Union Peace and Security Council, having countries like South Africa at the United Nations Security Council. Because remember that the AU Peace and Security Council found its leeway and its space based on the UN Security Council briefings on the conflict and the crisis that is in the North Sudan. Now for the AU, it's a new thinking and a narrative that must come out of the commissioners, investigators, that it should never happen that they come too late, because even the silencing of guns campaign that they'll want to pursue in 2020, it might be a futile exercise and just a dream that they are pursuing. So one can say that the AU should have stepped in long time ago when the issue of the crisis around the fuel and food, and as well as the arrest of Bashir. And the media, my sister, I think the AU has not been doing any justice. The media as well has not been covering the crisis in North Sudan. It has not been covering the crisis in Cameroon, the crisis of Ebola in DRC. So the media as well, for the issues around the Sudan, they should have played their role as well. So I'm critical to the media, but knowing that the media can do a little, but at least people are able to understand the question of the Arab imperialism.
And now my colleague Khayelitsha Khumalo said that we're almost sitting with a situation in Sudan where it's a revolution that's gone wrong. Rather sad to see what has happened there after not so long ago. We saw those wonderful pictures of freedom coming out of Sudan when Omar al-Bashir was finally ousted.
That is quite true, and we saw the role as well of women as we have raised, but the role of the Sudanese Professional Association being a pressure group and an organized grouping that as doctors, as teachers, they were worried about the state of economy, despite that Sudan came out of the sanction list as a terrorist state. Remember 2017, Sudan came out of the woods. Now what happened, the military and Bashir were stealing and looting because they were aware that their time was coming up. So I can assure you that maybe what will happen to the Transitional Military Council, it will be an end of the day with them, because the African Union laws are now pushing that we don't need military coups, we don't need unconstitutional state. And the AU, I think, they've given them 2 months. And I think they have played out of their minds as the military, forgetting the power of the civilians and of the communities, and which are the professionals. These are not ordinary militants. These are people who have been pushing the economy of Khartoum.
In as much as there's the opinion that this move by the AU is a little too late, are you hopeful that this now sets a precedent for those other hotspots in Africa where this kind of intervention is desperately needed?
Definitely, but the problem of North Africa, my dear sister, is that they have been undermining the role of the AU since the time of Jinping when he left, and when Nkosazana Zuma, there was just little of a disrespect. Like, you can talk about the Western Sahara case, Algeria case study, the Egypt case study. You find that the AU doesn't have the teeth to bite these militant rulers who are not even leaders, by the way. So that's where you find the challenge from the AU, even the role of the peacekeeping missions or the peacekeepers, the role of the right to can protect civilians. I think the AU must emphasize that member states must emphasize the right to protect civilians, mostly being women and children, because people who have been the victims of this violence have been women and children. And the AU should stop becoming the heads of state leaders in Addis Ababa, where they're drinking coffee and just talking about conflict resolution, but they are not grounded in the communities of practice where conflict is now ravaging this continent, my sister. So I think there might be lessons in North Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, but the regional bodies as well. Remember, the Arab League has an interest in this conflict. Remember, USA has an interest. Russia, why? Because of the natural resources. The oil that they've been stealing in the South Sudan has been the crisis, has been the core. The rebels that are in South Kordofan and in the Nuba Mountains that Bashir has been harassing are the cause. So the Sudan, my sister, is a very complex case study. Which other scholars, they call it, is the Africa's secret crisis.
Before I let you go, because we have run out of time, Sipho, what are you hoping to hear coming out of South Africa's own Department of Foreign Affairs on the back of this latest development involving the AU and Sudan?
My sister, I think we are seized with the Sudan for many years as South Africa having played a role in conflict resolution management in the OAU days, in the AU. South Africa going to be taking over the AU next year as the chair. And South Africa having an embassy in Khartoum. One will say that the conflict resolution is around the dialogue, mediation, and protection of the children, and avoid always writing speeches and twittering only about this crisis, but going into the humanitarian intervention, but as well as South Africa coming strong on critiquing even the embassy that is in South Africa about what has happened with the Transitional Military Council action and conduct.
We'll leave it there. Advocate Sipho Mantula from the Institute for Dispute Resolution in Africa. Thank you so much for that insight on that news coming through from the African Union.